How does race impact the lives of two strangers who called the same place home?
In Massachusetts, they don't want you to think it's racism, and it really is.
I lived in small towns throughout Massachusetts. Being Southeast Asian, that was a culture people were not familiar with.
We're traveling around the country to have real conversations about race with racial healing practitioners like Kevin Fong and Monica Haslett. In Washington, D.C., we met Ryan DeWin. And in Birmingham, Alabama, we met Erica Ayesi. They've never met, but they've lived only miles from each other in a state with a reputation of racial tension.
You're gonna sit right there. Tell me about your family and their story.
I come from a family of Vietnamese Lao refugees. They're known as boat people from the exodus of 1978. And there are 21 of them in my family. And the government placed my dad and his 7 brothers and their parents in Massachusetts. So I have that network of support. But my mom's side of the family in Hawaii.
Oh, wow.
Your parents are from Ghana, right?
There were just a sprinkle of West African families or African families in the community. Ghana was strong, but we had community members from Liberia, from the Civil War, some Nigerians there as well. So I think with my parents, it was, how can we create our community, an African community, in this larger community of people, of a larger white community? As a child of West African immigrants, things were very new, and my parents are a little older. So having to explain why I needed $100 for a prom dress, or what is a prom, those normal transitions in American childhood, my parents didn't have those things.
Yeah.
They grew up differently. So those moments of celebration with an age. So having to explain those things to my parents sometimes was challenging. And I took dance classes after school. And, my old school, African dad, just dance in the basement. He didn't understand why you have to pay, for more classes.
Of course, there are misinterpretations of your culture and your background and your heritage, especially being Southeast Asian. That was a culture people were not familiar with. And so I'd always be lumped in with the Chinese kids or the Korean kids, always mistaken in terms of who I was.
And how did that feel to you did you try to more fit in with them?
I think for me, I was always embracing of my heritage and my blood and my roots, just because I had such a strong foundation growing up, understanding where my family comes from and the rich, diverse stories we're affiliated with. But so it never really bothered me or got to me. I'd always hold my ground. But when I started to see my younger brother go through the same school systems, meet the same people, walk the same hallways as me, and see signs or symptoms of not wanting to be who he was, that's when it started to hit me.
As I was growing up and making friends, black friends, white friends, especially my dancer friends, and would bring friends over to my parents' house, I was always the house that had that goat meat smell, right? Or too much pepper, or the cow foot. Our house, smelled like a West African home. And then, what is that smell? And to me, it would smell appetizing. But to somebody else, it would smell, horrendous. And then when you eat it, it's all good, I never let it bring me down. I never felt embarrassed or uncomfortable because that was my identity.
Tell me about a time when you realized your race mattered.
I think it was always something unspoken. We never had a sit down in which we were told, oh, this is what you look like to other kids and this is what you should do. There was never a conversation of that nature in any way, and so it's kind of like you figure it out as you live life.
With us West African parents, they never really experienced racism.
Wow.
Because they're coming from a continent where everybody looks like you. And then to be in Boston and have issues of race was very new for my parents. I know especially for my dad, when he first came to the States, he came to Washington, D.C. in the 70s. And he said he didn't even know like really the word racism, and just a feeling that you were being treated differently. And as immigrants, who do you go to talk to? Especially in those days, there was no DEI or, who do you talk to about, I feel differently and I'm not even sure, I feel I'm being treated differently. Is it racism? Is it not racism? And in Massachusetts, where everything's covered, they don't want you to think it's racism, and it really is. Those were certainly challenges growing up.
Yeah. So how were you received by the Black community?
It was challenging, and at times I wasn't always sure if we were on the same page. We shared the same skin color, but were our backgrounds really the same beyond our skin color? Kind of, always consistently trying to build that bridge, and being a part of different after-school clubs with Africans, with African Americans, and kind of sharing our backgrounds individually and making sure that we are on the same team, because at the end of the day, we're in a larger white community. And so we will have the same battles of race. If there's an issue of racism, someone's not going to say, oh, it's different for you because you're African, or it's different for you because you're Black American. It's not. We really have to come together and fight the battle together.
I think I've always felt small microaggressions or acts of racism all throughout my life, not just recently. But it definitely intensified during the COVID-19 pandemic.
What did that look like?
Well, apart from the feeling the trauma of the relentless news and the barrage of hate crimes happening across the country, my own family was impacted. My mom, who works as a realtor, a neighbor of one of her properties called her racist slurs. And there's another instance in which my aunt's nail salon was vandalized. And of course, being Asian American in largely non-Asian American communities, we couldn't help but think that our race, our ethnicity was a factor.
How did that make you feel?
All of these collective instances made me feel awful. I felt powerless, helpless, but mostly I was hurting. Hurting for my parents, for my aunts and uncles, my grandparents, every single Asian immigrant, migrant, worker who had sacrificed their own dreams in pursuit of a better life here. And they worked so hard to escape war, to come to a country that tried to guarantee them peace and safety. I feel like those are not big asks, peace and safety, but they couldn't even be afforded that basic right. And so it was a bit of hurt, and it was also a bit of anger.
It's always like been the outside, oh, Boston's, one of the most racist places in America, but do Bostonians say that, for themselves? And I think they're starting to own that for themselves. And trying to, in some ways, to dismantle it. So there's small little pockets, and then using social media to bring these pockets together, because there's a mix of different races, but it's not integrated.
Yeah, it's like Chicago. We're very segregated, and it's the separation that creates that constant opportunity for
and it makes people leave.
I decided to organize. On March 13, 2021, we held the Stop Asian Hate Boston Rally and March, which was attended by close to 1,000 people of all colors and backgrounds and ages. And it was a really beautiful sight to see, because it showed me that I was not alone in this, which I had felt for so long during the pandemic. Half the speakers during our rally that day weren't even Asian American. They came from the Black community, from the Latino community, the undocumented community, from the queer community. And we really want to make it a point that hate against one is hate against all. And unless we band together, unless we build allyships, we are not going to dismantle this.
I firmly believe that we can end racism within our lifetime. That's what keeps me going. What are a couple of things you can personally do to help end racism within our lifetime?
I think no matter what I do, as long as I'm acknowledging that racism is occurring, it contributes to dismantling it. So it doesn't even have to be on the ground protesting or organizing like I did during the pandemic. It can be more subtle in terms of just writing and capturing the stories and the issues that are pervading them.
One of my last questions and favorite questions to ask is, do you believe that racism or ending racism is possible?
I'm not sure if any of these ism ideologies, ending them is possible. I think we just have to continue to have very uncomfortable, courageous conversations to break through racism. It will always be there because it's not just thinking, it's in policy, it's in infrastructure, it's in housing, it's systematic and it's embedded in the psyche of America. We have to be uncomfortable and have uncomfortable conversations.
Changing the narrative starts with sharing stories. Share your story with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.